It's that time again, 6 p.m. on Sunday evening. Welcome to Steve's Place. Tonight's guest will be John L. Petersen from the Arlington Institute. But before that, let's go through and uh, do our housekeeping here. I reminded people to sign up for the Tesla Tech YouTube channel. I've just put, in fact, today I just put up two more videos up there, and I'll be doing at least 30 this week. So keep your eyes out. Those will be Global Science Conference videos I'm putting up there right now. Um, to find it, just go to the website at teslatech.info, and off to your right, there'll be like a big yellow block there that handles all the YouTube stuff, including our conference directory. So if you just know a conference you want to check out, just look it up in the directory there and click on it and bring that one up. And then also the speaker directory, which will also bring up the speakers in alphabetical order. Okay. Um, we do have emergent breakthroughs on here. Some of the stuff will no longer is no longer available because the people who present it are no longer with us, unfortunately. Anyway, we encourage everyone to get the exclusive membership, the extraordinary bargain for only $9.99 a month. Gives you access 24/7 to almost 1,000 videos up there. And so when you join, um, be sure you select the exclusive member because that's the one that gets you the videos. And one more word is be sure that you keep checking your emails and that, and make sure that we're not going in your spam box because we're getting ready to put out a lot of information here shortly about the conference. Speaking of our conference, it'll be August 9th to 13th at the Crown Plaza. I want everyone to show up there. I'd like people to come out and meet other people. You can go watch all these other videos on YouTube or wherever, but you just don't get the same impact you do when you sit across with somebody and have a cup of coffee with them, and you can learn what the, stuff that they won't reveal on video, and it's a great time just to make a friend, because sometimes we get out here and we feel like we're all alone, and we're not. There's a lot of people who think like we do and are experimenting with things and that. And the only way you get to meet them is if you, like come to our conference, because there's just not a lot of opportunities out there to meet people. And we are the major conference for alternative energy and alternative medicine at this point. There is a conference up in Idaho, but it's very limited, as far as attendance goes. But he will be available online, and we'll be advertising that soon too. So anyway, if you get a chance, sign up now. It's 30% discount if you sign up now, and our phone number will be 520-463-1994. Call it after the show, of course, or you can just go up to our website at teslatech.info. Like I said, 30% discount. You can also reserve rooms now at the hotel. They start at $82 a night. If you have a problem with getting a room or anything, call me immediately, and I could probably help you because there's some idiosyncrasies in these programs, that we can tweak, if I know about it. Anyway, and then one last thing is be sure to hit that thumbs up thing. It's very important, that you do that so that we get be found on the search engines. And now, without further ado, let me bring up John Petersen. And he's from the Arlington Institute. And if you want to contact him, you can go to his website at www.arlingtoninstitute.org. Okay, and so, John, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Very nice to be here with you all. I'm a futurist. I'm a professional futurist. There aren't too many of us, maybe a couple hundred in the world. And I'm the founder and the president of the Arlington Institute, which I started 33 years ago here outside of Washington, D.C. at that time. Now we're located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, which is 100 miles from Washington in the Appalachian Mountains. Gets us away from the Beltway and all of the other kind of problems associated with Washington, D.C. But it's easy to get there if you have to. And so we look at the world differently than most people, as you'll hear here in a minute. We're very interested in the emergent new world and the new human and the extraordinary change that we're all going through right now. And at the Arlington Institute, we have a variety of programs. You can check them out at the URL that's there. All of them are related to this emergent new world and the transition to this new world.
So what do you see the trending here in the next year as far as like science accomplishments?
Well, let me talk to you a little bit about that. I've had a couple of things happen in the last couple of days that I thought were kind of interesting. Number one, this morning I got a note from Peter Diamandis, who's a well-known guy in the futures business and other areas as well. And Peter sent out a blog and he said, no human coders in 5 years, ? And what he was talking about is artificial intelligence. And he said, number one, OpenAI's ChatGPT, which everybody knows about by now, I presume, can now pass Google's exam for high-level software developers. So it can be a software developer just as the highest level at Google. And secondly, it said GitHub network reported that 46% of code across the programming languages is built using Copilot, the company's AI-powered developer tool. And thirdly, its data point was DeepMind's Alpha Code AI has outperformed human programmers. When pitted against over 5,000 human participants, the AI outperformed 45% of the expert programmers. And what Peter's point was is that artificial intelligence is fundamentally changing this world, and particularly in the area of coding for computer programs. Now, that's only one of a number of data points. A couple other things have shown up to it. I'm in the middle of reading a book that was recommended to me called The Naked Bible. It's about Mauro Biglino, who's an Italian translator of the Bible. He's perhaps the best known Bible translator in the world today. And Biglino starts off by saying, let's just go back to the most original Hebrew, and let's look at it and just read what it says, and not with any interpretation, but let's believe that what they're saying is perhaps true. And as he goes through this extraordinary book, which I would certainly recommend to anyone watching, he goes through this book, and what he comes out and he essentially says this. I'll just cut to the chase and give you a bottom line, which is very disruptive for somebody like me who came from out of the Midwest in a very conservative religious family, and where we read the Bible all the time and went to church 5 times a week. And I went to a Christian college and so on. And so this was part of my life. And when you read Biglino, about Biglino and the way he looks at this, and he says, listen, all I do is read and tell you what it says, and I don't interpret it. And what it says is, this is the Bible. It says that there is no mention in the whole Bible of a transcendent God. None at all. What it does talk about is a kind of a local God. As it turns out, he turns out to be a warlord named I'll get it here in a minute. But this local God is the one who's looking after essentially his tribe, which is the Israelis, or the uh, uh, Israelites, and 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 the whole Bible is describing essentially, and particularly the Old Testament, is describing him and his kind of management and interest in his kind of group. And his group, uh, and to give you an example, many of us are familiar with the beginning of Genesis, where it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Well, it turns out that the original language really doesn't say that at all. What it says is essentially is at the beginning of this story, then this God that they've more recent translators and religious translators have called it, uh, a transcendent God. But what it really turns out to be is it's in one of the Elohim, and the Elohim are a group of multiple entities who are from somewhere else, very powerful, and they fly around in ships. It's all over in the Bible that they're flying around in ships. They call them fiery chariots and such things, but it describes them completely. And then these are warships, and they have weapons on the front of them and such. And that in fact, what the Bible is all about is the story of this guy who is trying to consolidate his position. He's trying to get as much land as possible. So if you've ever read the Old Testament, you know that it's very bloody and barbaric, and they're running around killing all kinds of people and women and children and destroying everything. And as it turns out, even towns and cities that are really quite peaceful are destroyed. And that's because he's trying to, consolidate his position relative to other ones. Well, it goes on and on and on like that. And what it turns out to be is that there's no indication anywhere that says a life after death. That was something that it was, or eternity. Those terms have been inserted later on by different groups that were trying to promote their own version of their theology. There's a great deal more about this that we don't have time to talk about. But for somebody like me, it was very disruptive to read this and say, wait a second, all of the history that I've assumed to be true, that are extractions and extensions of the Bible, are all subject to reconsideration now, in my mind at least. And it's really profoundly important because all of Western civilization is built upon the ideas that were underneath the Bible. The Ten Commandments, for instance, Biglino says to you, this is this guy's rules for his tribe, the Israelites, and to keep them from going outside and marrying and engaging with other folks from other tribes. And it goes through the similar things about the Immaculate Conception and so on, because it's really quite common in the Bible that it talks about in the Old Testament, where these entities would come down from up above and cohabitate with the women and produce babies, and which is in fact has happened and probably happened in the cases of Mary. Well, anyway, it's very disruptive. And you say, wait a second, all of what I thought about, all of what I based my life on, all about what Western culture and society is based on, the ideas and the principles are all been modified and derived from a process that is where it really doesn't say what we've been told it says. And so then I found an article, a piece by James Corbett from the Corbett Report. And Corbett is talking about the emergence of fourth generation warfare. And this is something that you really should look at. If you go to corbettreport.com and look under fourth gen, he's got this whole half-hour long video about fourth generation warfare. And again, the bottom line on that is that warfare has evolved through three previous generations, is now in the fourth generation. And the fourth generation is not kinetic warfare and trying to bomb things and everything. It is literally a warfare that is trying to capture your mind. And it's trying to capture the ideas and the perspectives and the minds of other people. And when you listen to this from Corbett's point of view, it's, again, you just kind of back up and you say, wait a second, there's this systematic kind of effort that's going on from many different dimensions, all designed to try to capture the minds of us here in the United States, at least, as well as other places as well. And almost nobody understands this and nobody knows about it. Well, I've suggested to you three different kind of highly disruptive things that are ongoing right now that are changing the essence of how we understand history, that are completely turning upside down everything related to creativity in general and computer coding in particular. And then this whole idea that the warfare is now being done through the press and other kinds of ways, and governments and intelligence services and such. And it's a war for your mind, and they're trying to essentially capture you so that you are dominated by the powers that be. Well, the question that certainly that is begged out of all of this is to say, so what can we do in the middle of all of this? How in the world can you not just be swept downstream by all of this change? And Corbett makes a really good point and says, well, you can't fight them on their own terms because they have so much more power and so much more experience and resources. And so what you have to do is essentially what I think it was Bucky Fuller, or maybe it was Einstein, but I think it was Fuller, says, you can't, it's, it was Einstein that said you can't solve a problem that it was developed. Well, that's well, writ large. It says that somebody their strengths and where they've built up all these defenses. What you want to do is go around and try something sideways or orthogonally from what is being presented to you. Well, in this particular case, what James Corbett suggests is that we have to start to build an idea for a new world. How do we build a new world? How do we do something outside of this present system, and essentially sidestep the whole efforts and the processes and the extraordinary kind of energy and everything that's being put into try to capturing all of us. And that really resonated with me because here at the Arlington Institute, as I alluded to, we're in the business of trying to think about this new world that emerges. We believe there's a new human that is going to come out of all of this change. It's an extraordinary time in the evolution of humanity, of the species, literally, and for lots of reasons, which we could maybe talk about some other time, Steve. we will. We could build the very compelling case that a new human is emerging. This is a jump in the evolutionary process of the species, and out of that, then will come a new world, because the people, the new humans, think differently. They have a whole different perspectives and so on. And so the question kind of becomes, like I suggested, is how do you build a new world? And so what I'd like to do is kind of walk you down, for the next few minutes, walk you down through a process about how you could think about what a new world might be, and begin uh, to frame the whole kind of issue. This is important because uh, uh, the reality that we all experience is a product of our thinking, and a product of the imagery that we generate, and the visions that we have, the ideas that we have in our minds. And there are many different sources, unconventional for sure, but uh, nevertheless, many of them who do suggest that you can get your mind entrained. If you get a number of people that have in their minds entrained and are carrying the same idea, the same image, the same vision, then that in fact then will cause the universe to reconfigure itself and produce that new vision. So we're talking about here about as a new world and what that might look like. And the purpose for doing that is to, in order so that many people can start to think in the same direction, can visualize the same direction about what's coming downstream. So now what you need to keep in mind is that as you move yourself down this track, is the reason you're building a new world. Everybody doesn't just wake up on some Thursday morning and decide they want to build a new world. It's the impetus to engage in this kind of an effort is the product of a certain set of conditions that have pushed you into that space. You've had some experiences, because if everything's all right, you're not going to do anything. I mean, if everything's all right, why change it? And so if you're really up to the level where you're talking about building a new world, you have to ask yourself, well, what in the world caused you to get to the place where you'd really want to build a new world? And all I can say is, whatever that is, it's an event or a series of events that is very large and very compelling and highly catalytic. That to get you over the hurdle to say we got to build a new world is to have said, whatever just happened, I don't ever want to happen again, and we've got to rebuild ourselves again. So you got to keep that in the back of your mind. Something here is going to happen in the next few years, the next handful of years, 4 or 5 years, that is of such significance that it is going to make it very clear to large numbers of people that we need a new world. Now, the great forecaster Martin Armstrong, whose Socrates computer program has never been wrong in 45 years, says that between 2025 and 2027, there will be a global civil war. Well, if that turns out to be the case, then that's a pretty big deal if all of the people across the planet rise up against their governments and say essentially that they've been betrayed for all kinds of host of reasons, and they bring down the governments and then start to rebuild themselves in other geopolitical kind of terms. Well, it's something like that I'm talking about. Some major event that causes everyone to get into the streets and say, enough of this. Let's rebuild the world. So you got to start. So that starts, and you always have to keep that in the back of your mind, because it's almost like you've had a near-death experience, or you've lived through the Great Depression, or any number of other similar kind of events. It just colors everything downstream all the decisions that you make, everything is framed by and conditioned by that event. And so having done all that, and if you were trying to think about, and this is what we do here at the Arlington Institute, if you're trying to think about how this new world might emerge, you would walk yourself down a line something like this, and you'd start to say, so what are the core objectives? What are the core objectives that we want for this new world? Because that's going to drive everything else. And I would suggest you a number of them that are compatible with the basic ideas that come out of ancient religious and other kinds of literature that all say that there is a period of 1,000 years of peace that is on our horizon. And if in fact you're looking at this time as being the impetus, the beginning of this period of 1,000 years of peace, that obviously there's something that has changed everybody's mind and sent them off in a new direction. And so one of the core objectives that would start to come out to kind of set the stage and allow you to literally think about the possibility that you could have 1,000 years of peace is that there would be this common agreement that everybody's got to get along with each other, and we got to help each other. You would be kind of the end of competition and so on. But and we can talk about that here in a minute. But the idea is that everybody's going to get along here. This is a common kind of response after an earthquake or a hurricane or some other kind of thing, when all the infrastructure is blown away and people are in the neighborhood are trying to get together, and there's this kind of emergent feeling that shows up that says, come on, let's all work together and make this work. And what also would come out of this thing is would be necessary core objective would be a new understanding of reality. This would be a new world, after all. It would not be the old world. It would be a new world, and that by definition, it would work in a different way. It would be based upon a different set of principles. And so both in terms of physics and the physical world in general and science in particular, that we're moving ourselves into a whole new space. The Tesla Tech Conference is a wonderful example of that, where you're getting people together who see the world in a different way, and particularly science and the physical world in a different way, and are emerging and developing wonderful new capabilities. What you'd have to have is new ideas of geopolitics. Remember, our old ideas have produced the kind of world that we've got right now. And so you'd have to reconfigure all of that and start to say, how do we reorganize ourselves in a new kind of way? Yeah, there'd have to be whole new notions about cosmology. What's the whole process of where we came from and how that all works? Because I'm telling you, there's all of this is emergent. This is not all things that have to happen that nobody's been talking about. There's a lot of things in the works right now around all of this. There'd be no new ideas around biology and energy and how we are all relate to each other in kind of energetic terms, because as we'll talk about in a minute, all healthcare, there'll be a revolution in healthcare that'll all be built upon this new notion of how the essence of who we are and how it all works together. And then will be certainly a commitment to understanding the systems nature of our reality. What that means is that everything is connected to everything else. And we're all part of a very big, complex, highly dynamic system. And if you don't understand and that isn't an integral part of how you make decisions, then you will generate reproduce the kind of problems that we already have that are systemic from the fact that you don't see things in systems terms. What it also would be out of this thing is that there would be a new sense of self and a new understanding, essentially a broadening awareness that of not only who you are and how you relate to other folks and how do you operate in multidimensional, not only physical but metaphysical, if you will, ways, but also how humanity then relates to other life that might be in the universe. And so there's a giant kind of change that happens here in a relatively short time. But if you think about it, you know that these kinds of ideas are popping up and emerging all over the place. And then, of course, as I've suggested, that you'd have a commitment that you would not have any wars. You would not solve your problems that way. This is not the way to get along with people, which was the first point that I was made. And so it'd be a new world that would be a combination of not only a new kind of notion of who we are as individuals, but also in a social terms, but also you'd have this expanded in cosmological kind of space that would begin to take into consideration and engagement of life off of the planet and other kind of places. So, you'd start with something like that, a basic kind of set of parameters that said, this is what we'd like. This is what this new world should be based upon. These are the things that are important to us. And you then go from there. And from there, you then go on and say, well, what are the assumptions that we are going to make about how this world operates and the situation and that, what do we put on the table that is a given that colors then everything else. And one of them is in this kind of little scenario planning process is that the internet exists. In this new world, you can't get there from here without the internet operating. If, for instance, in this transition process that there would be something that would take down the internet, there's no way that you could build this kind of new world that we're starting to kind of imagine here. We'd be driven back into kind of the Stone Age almost kind of stuff, horse and buggies, because nothing else would work because we're so dependent upon the internet. And so the internet would have to be one of the assumptions. And another assumption would be, nobody would get around the table trying to think about and design and plan for this new world and say, well, we got to go build it the same way it was before. No. None of the systems, none of those things. No one would start that way because that's what gave us the problems that we had in the past. And so the new world would necessarily be significantly different than the one that we have now. I think one of the assumptions would be that it's an electric universe. You'd move on past Einsteinian quantum physics and on to the next model of physics, which would essentially be the electric universe. That would say that all of the gravitational force and everything is not a function of mass, which is the Einsteinian perspective. Now it comes from the positive and negative kind of attraction that comes from electricity and magnetism and the whole series of things like that. That opens the door, if it's a whole electric universe, to all humans being electric, essentially, and every other component of our lives being electric. And I can tell you as an electrical engineer that you can engineer electricity. And so it suddenly opens the door to being able to doing all kinds of new things that you never thought possible because you had the wrong kind of mindset about all of this. And then you need a whole bunch of new principles that would animate and describe this new space. Number one, essentially, there would be no secrets. Now, I don't mean no secrets, but relatively no secrets. One of the biggest problems we have right now is all of the secrecy the government has. And what it does is it constrains the flow of innovation and knowledge and such. We'll listen to Steve's phone. Yeah. But in this new world, you wouldn't, you'd start out and say, let's not do that one again. So we're not going to have all this secret stuff that we've had before. And the major problem of the old world is, that is to say, our present world, is that the only thing, our whole system is designed to only value money. When you do any kind of an analysis of a business or an organization or any other kind of thing, you look at their numbers and you look at their financial reports and such, and they all just talk about money. They don't talk about all of the other things that are important to life, relationships and love and creativity and any number of other kind of things that are easily as important or more so. And so than just money. And so what you've got to do here is find a whole new way in which you expand the way that the metrics that you use to determine value and expand them from just being built around money and currency. And again, as I said before, this would be a world about cooperation rather than competition. There are many people who are talking and have been for years, decades, literally talking about co-optation and other kinds of terms that try to introduce the whole idea of cooperation into the equation. So it's not just competition. And certainly that would be the case in this world. You have a commitment to solving problems without kind of physical conflict. So you really have to have new mechanisms for, a whole variety of things where we now kind of default to using weapons and violence in one sort or another, whether it has to do with policing and law enforcement. By the way, you have all kinds of the whole business of laws, and it would change dramatically. But you'd have to rethink. We'd have to rethink all of that because now remember, you're not in the business of shooting somebody and or beating them up or the other kind of things that we do kind of regularly in terms of prisons and such. And again, hearkening back to the notion of the systems thinking that I mentioned earlier, there would be this common understanding that everything and everyone is connected to everyone else in some literal way. I mean, if it's all electric and we're all configurations within the electric field, then any of a number of sources, including physicists, suggest that we're all connected to each other, some more so than others. And but when we use violence to solve problems, that affects the larger system. What they also suggest, by the way, is that even the larger physical system, like the weather and the climate and so on, are all connected together with the emotional state of human beings. And so if we got to the place where instead of using violence to solve problems, that we got along with each other and we started to build our life around these terms of getting along, that in fact, lots of people suggested that the weather would get better and the climate would be better, and the whole system would adjust to the feelings and the emotions that are driving the whole thing. You would start with an assumption that said that extraterrestrial life is real and it exists and it's coming this way. Anybody that follows and interested in this subject knows that there are more people talking about this and more governments saying things about this than ever before. I mean, since 2017, the U.S. government has time after time exposed more and more things that they've known about UFOs and so on. There's a committee of the intelligence on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. There's a subcommittee that's doing nothing but thinking specifically about UFOs and other extraterrestrial life. There's a whole new well-funded operation going on in the Defense Department, and that's doing the same thing and calling all kinds of people from the outside in to talk to them about what they know about this stuff. There's a real serious kind of movement going on here. And, the futurist in me says, I can see the place. Don't know exactly where it is, but there's a place out on this horizon, not very far ahead, where where it's going to become very clear, and that we've probably been talking to this. Governments in secret have been talking and working together with extraterrestrial groups for quite some time, and now it'll start to become public. Let me tell you, when that happens, then everything is up for grabs, because if you try to think your way through this in a logical way, you would have to say that these extraterrestrial groups have been around a lot longer than we are. We have, because they can get here and we can't get there, right? And or that's what the presumption is, at least. And the fact that they can get here from wherever they come from, another star, another galaxy, whatever it is, means that they're very, very far advanced in terms of their technology above where we are right now. And that means that when they show up, they start telling stories. And they start saying, well, you don't understand history. Let us tell you how history really worked. And you really don't understand how science and physics works, because we're 3 generations more advanced than you are. And so let us tell you about that. And you don't, and they tell you all these kinds of things that just pull the pins on the kind of the infrastructure that has supported humanity and society and our understandings of who we are and how this all works. To fly in the face of technology, because they tell us all kinds of new technology that you could do, and there are people in the religious community, some of them who would kind of freak out and already believe that it's all demonic and so on. But in any case, it is a really big deal, and it's right on the horizon. And if you're building a new world, you'd have to factor that in. You'd have to put that on the table. And and as I think about this, and that's what I do for a living, as I think about this, I think that this new world would probably be built, rather than on piles and piles and piles of laws and regulations. It's been estimated, I read something the other day where they said that the average person in the United States commits 3 felonies a day. But they don't understand, they don't know about it. There are so many laws saying so many things that nobody understands, that essentially you're breaking laws, doing things that everybody does, which, by the way, gives the police and other folks always have something that they can use to to grab you and put you in prison or whatever they want to do. But in any case, this new world would be built around some new principles. And I think that my guess is that there's about half a dozen of these new principles, and that they're things like the golden rule: do to others what you would have them do to you. There's another one might be you can do anything that you want as long as you don't hurt anyone. There might be, I don't know. There are some really fundamental kind of concepts, about a half a dozen, I'd say, that if you taught children throughout their early education, and it became an integral part of how everyone saw each other and understood how to get along, that it would color everything that we did. And so it's like the difference between coming up to an intersection and waiting for the government light to turn green or blue or yellow and red and tell you that it's okay to go. The other difference is that if you have a traffic circle and you don't have the government telling you anything, you can just go up there and you know what the basic rule is. And the basic rule is that in the United States, at least, you look to the left and you wait until there's an opening, and then you merge into the space. Well, that's the idea, that there are some very basic principles, and if we all knew what they were, and they were an integral part of this new world, that we would naturally behave differently, and we would produce a whole institutions and everything else in quite a different way. And so, having started with those assumptions, you would now then move on to say, well, what are the requirements in this new world? Well, you'd have to start to articulate some of these ideas. And, for me doing it, I'd say that you'd have to have some new values, and those values need to be explicit. And it's things like love and compassion and gratitude and forgiveness and such that start to become the underlying fabric of how this new world works. And there would have to be some new operating principles that are described and proliferated throughout the system that said, here's how we're going to operate, and we're going to do this in a different way, and it's going to be built around these basic new values. What you'd also have to do is you'd have to start to build a new vision. That's that's what this I'm just describing here is essentially the architecture, the underpinnings of what could then turn into a vision of what a new world could look like. But you'd have to start to make that explicit, build movies and videos and other things so people could start to see what the an average day in the life would be in this new world, operating under these new ideas and these new principles and the new objectives. You'd have to have a new legal system, of course, and we mentioned that. The present legal system produces, along with the economic system, produces the problems that we have right now that are the most onerous and disruptive and destructive aspects of our lives. And so we'd have to figure out that. We'd have one of the keys that almost is guaranteed, the only get here to there, is have new energy systems. Some of these things that have been under wraps for a long time would have to come forward, and you'd have to free up inventors and researchers to be able to solve these kinds of problems. Remember, this would be a space without all these secrets and stuff. And you'd have to work out the details about how you do, how you do intellectual property and other such kinds of things. But it's clearly doable in a new way. But all of that would have to be pointed to, a good bunch of it would have to be pointed toward energy, a new energy, because the whole system works on energy, and how you produce that energy and distribute the energy is just structurally woven into every other aspect of life. And I think what you would also come out of this is a new internet capability that would kind of jumpstart, kick the whole world into a whole new space. And I think that this artificial intelligence that I talked about earlier on has the distinct potential of being able to do that in spades, because we don't even begin to understand what you can do with that. And we've just seen the early leading edge of how it's being used in universities to write term papers and stuff like that, and now do computer programming. I mean, it's only been around, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months, or something like that, and already, like they're saying, it's doing coding better than 45% of the coders out there, and it has extraordinary implications. Where it really has interesting implications is if we would use it and apply it toward going toward this new world, toward finding a new community, to finding the relationships and the structures and the options for going into this in this new direction, which would build new communities. There's no way in the world. There's no way in the world that you can get to a new world without building new ideas around community. And how, because you can't do this by yourself. We have to do it all with somebody else. And so, one of the things that would be central to all of this is how people reorganize themselves around some of these new ideas. There'd have to be a new financial system that gets away from the fundamental shortcomings of the present debt-based one. And it would almost certainly be built around a real blockchain that didn't have any backdoors, to where you could really move value around without the government believing that the government could get in the back and mess with it. There would also obviously have to be a new economic system. You'd have to move to kind of capitalism plus, or whatever it is. I mean, it couldn't be the same one that we have now. It'd have to be a new one. I don't know what it is, but I know is that you couldn't try to duplicate what we do now into this new world and expect it to be any different than it is. And so, in terms of healthcare and all of that, I think it's moving toward energy-based interventions and understanding. Whole new ideas that say that it's not germs and whatever, but it really operates in quite a different way. And again, like I say, you can engineer it all if you can do that. And so this is the underlying notion about med beds and some of the things that we've all heard about, is that there's a new kind of world coming out of that. In terms of agriculture and food production, this would be a world where you have almost all of your farming would be indoor. There's a lot of very interesting things that are happening in terms of vertical farming inside of buildings, and by that I mean not just horizontal, stacking beds one over the top of each other, but vertical, growing things in poles that go sometimes up to 20 feet high. It's far more efficient, uses all of the cubic space inside of a building, and it's 35 times at a minimum, 35 times more efficient than conventional agriculture. So we seem to be going in that direction. What also would be kind of woven into this thing necessarily was a commitment toward resilience in terms that we don't have now. Having worked your way through this extraordinary event that has been the impetus for this big push to design a new world, you would necessarily make an integral part of that the whole idea that no matter what happens, whether it's climate change, And by the way, it's probably almost certainly going to get very cold for about 60 or so years is what it looks like right now. It's not going to get warm. And so you need to have to build in the resilience to be able to deal with that, as well as earth changes and other such things, earthquakes and volcanoes, which seem to be rising and be on the horizon. Um, uh, all of these ideas about history and where we all came from, it's called cosmogony, and even physics and so on would all begin to rapidly move into a new kind of space and provide a new base for how humans lived and operated. And then, as I suggested, have mentioned a couple of times, this whole business of extraterrestrial life would have to be dealt with and become an integral part again of how we live. It would be a key aspect of all major considerations, in the same way that I suppose only probably a bigger way than as we consider national decisions as they relate to, say, in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, or Russia, or Europe, or such. It would be a, a, a necessary and presumed kind of aspect of how that all works. Well, if you take all of these things and these ideas and you wrap them all together, what it suggests is that there is this is really big and very complex. This is not simple to try to do. But remember, I started off by saying there's all this force that's behind pushing you into this new space, and that force is this event that you just went through. But it's convinced everybody that they've got to get a new world and that they're not going to do whatever that was again because it was so painful or threatening or scary. And so there would be a pressure to move this. Martin Armstrong's computer says that by 2032 there will be no United States of America, and that there will be 5 or 6 different countries in North America where the United States used to be, and that those will be new countries and they will operate, and there will be no European Union. Well, if the computer even starts to be right about that, and by the way, there's all kinds of reasons why that computer has been so accurate for so long. If the computer program is correct about that, then what there is an amazing amount of reconfiguration, rethinking, and a whole new process is going to happen in a very, very short period of time. And that promises to be the next decade at the most, if not less than that, promises to be the most extraordinary time in human history in general, and that would certainly make it the most extraordinary time in our lives.
Well, that's pretty comprehensive. Have you ever read the problem of increasing human energy by Tesla?
I have not.
Well, I would suggest you do, because it kind of encapsulates everything that you talked about, only from a 1900 viewpoint, And but he came to the conclusion that men would never give up fighting, And his one of his goals was to prevent that the damage to humans by going to a total mechanical thing where you have basically robots fighting robots, And he built the first automaton back in 1898 and demonstrated it in the Madison Square Gardens. But that's I'm looking here at the Ukraine, and I'm seeing all this use of drones and everything, and it's kind of like his vision is starting to come to pass. Only the problem is it's only halfway there, and as a result, it's really decreased in the mass of human energy here. You know, but yeah,
Yeah, I'll look that up.
it's a great thing. You know, um, and that's what kind of like what I kind of base the whole conferences on. Is kind of along those lines because he's covering everything. You know, health, energy, the works. You know, and and so yeah. But anyway, there was one question here. I don't know if you caught that.
No.
Here from Toby,
Okay. Oh, hi, Toby.
and he talks about this road to 2015.
Yeah, it's my first book.
That's yours, okay? So, what is your prediction of the situation with China as opposed to your assessment in '94?
I don't remember what my assessment in '94 was, so I don't know, Toby. I don't. Uh, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, then he also has this other one. The prediction at the time of the publication was that 2012 ZPE would comprise a major piece. And then he has a
Of the industrial sector, yeah, and move into engineering and manufacturing. Well, that has been constrained, as we all know, by governments and agencies and governments, and not. But I can tell you that Dr. Harold Putoff is in the process. They are engineering from manufacturing. They're doing manufacturing engineering on a handheld communications device, which is a scalar, which would be this first scalar of telephone, if you want, radio, that will instantly communicate through the Earth to the other side of the Earth or anywhere else in the universe. And that is very close to becoming commercialized. And so there are some of these kinds of things, that at least that I'm familiar with, as moving toward commercialization, which will again call into question a lot of the assumptions that we've had in the past.
okay. And then we have a question from Maria. What is the most exotic technology or concept you have come across?
Well, the what I think about is, again, as I've mentioned a couple of times, is the fact that if it's all electric, then it all can be engineered. And so that is one way. For instance, that's the way that you explain the underpinnings of these medbed notion, that, or the Star Trek, whatever device that they used to use, that you could change the configuration and the operation of different components or parts of your body based upon changing the electrical characteristics in some kind of way. If you take that basic idea and you run that up, run it out 1,000 or 10,000 years or something like that, what it means is that everything about you could potentially be engineered or changed or influenced from the outside. It's clear that the intelligence communities in another number of places in the world have the ability to put ideas into your head, voices into your head for sure, and ideas as well. They can make you sick, they can make you well, they can make you love, they can make you hate, they can make you kill, they can make you do all kinds of things that you otherwise wouldn't do. And by the way, you won't know that you, in some cases, you wouldn't know that you did them, and you would never remember them. Well, all of this also opens the door to extraterrestrial uh, groups being able to manipulate reality in ways that we don't commonly think about, or to shift and change and things that we just take for granted. I mean, how do you know whether an idea that's in your head comes from you or from somewhere else? I mean, where do ideas come from after all? And these if ideas don't show up just between the meat between your ears, uh, but are part of some part of the larger environment that we live in, and to say nothing about every part of the this universe that we live in, this reality, then any and all, then there's the distinct possibility of interactions and reaction that are going on that we don't even begin to understand, that we've just gotten used to, and we just presume that it's the way the sun rises every day, right? And so it just happens. And you know, I knew a guy once, for instance, who said that well, the reason why we have seasons in the northern hemisphere or in the southern hemisphere on this planet is not because the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees. It's because the uh, not the eclipse, but the shoot, I've lost the word. The plane in which the Earth kind of rotates around the sun is tilted 23.5 degrees. Not the Earth itself, but the plane that it is, and that in fact generates the changes in seasons. When he told that to an astronomer at the naval astronomy at the naval people who do astronomy, the guy said, "Oh, that explains why all my numbers are off just a little bit." And so the point is that we take for granted all of these things that we've been told forever, and because the model kind of works, you don't question it at all. And so there are a whole bunch of things like that I think about that could literally really start to change once we kind of untether ourselves from the present kind of model and paradigm.
Okay. Well, it's getting pretty late, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this up. And just want to remind everyone about the conference. And thank you, John, for being here. Um, and maybe in the future we'll get together again. Who knows? Maybe you'll show up at our conference. Anyway, you have a good evening, and thank you for your participation.
It's very nice. Yeah, very nice. Thank you for having me, Steve. And I will plan to come to your conference. I always enjoy it.
Great. So.